The vast emptiness of space held many secrets, but none quite as intriguing as the moonflower species. These beings, tall and graceful with their iridescent skin that seemed to glow under any light, had remained isolated from the galactic community for centuries. Not because they were hostile, but because they were feared. Tom Miller was just a regular maintenance engineer aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Star Seeker, when they first made contact with the Moonflower civilization. Unlike the sleek and pristine ships of other alien races, the Moonflower vessels looked like floating gardens, their hull covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with life. What made the Moonflowers unique, and feared, was their unusual bonding process. Their females possessed a natural defense mechanism. Anyone who tried to form a close relationship with them would experience their worst fears manifested in vivid hallucinations. These visions had driven away countless potential allies and diplomatic missions. Even the bravest warriors from warrior races had fled in terror after attempting to negotiate with them. The human delegation was no different. One by one, the diplomats and officials excused themselves from meetings, pale-faced and shaking. Some even requested immediate transfers back to Earth. The Moonflowers had grown used to this reaction, their beautiful faces showing resigned acceptance of their isolation. Tom wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the diplomatic sections of the ship. But one day, while fixing a malfunctioning air recycler, he literally stumbled into one of their meetings. As he picked himself up from his embarrassing fall, he found himself face to face with Lead Ambassador Rose of the Moonflowers. Instead of the terror that others experienced, Tom felt only a mild unease, like the feeling before a job interview. Rose's silver eyes widened in surprise. Never had anyone remained so calm in her presence. "You are different," she said, her voice melodious yet filled with wonder. "The fear, it doesn't consume you." Tom shrugged, his tools still clutched in his hands. "Well, ma'am, when you've spent 15 years fixing things that could explode and kill everyone on board if you make one wrong move, you learn to work through your fears." The other Moonflowers in the room gathered closer, their luminescent patterns brightening with interest. They had never encountered someone who could withstand their natural defense mechanism. In their culture, this ability marked someone as a potential true bondmate, something they had never found outside their own species. The ship's captain was quickly informed of this unprecedented development. Within hours, Tom found himself promoted from maintenance engineer to primary human liaison with the Moonflower species. He didn't feel particularly special or brave, he was just a guy who had learned that fear was a natural part of life, not something to run from. What he didn't know was that this accidental meeting would change not only his life but the future of human-Moonflower relations forever. The Moonflowers had a saying, "True bonds are forged in the crucible of fear." And Tom Miller, with his practical approach to fear and his steady hands, was about to forge the strongest bond of all. As the Star Seeker continued its diplomatic mission, Tom began to notice something strange. The Moonflower's bioluminescent patterns seemed to synchronize with his presence, creating beautiful displays that the ship's crew had never seen before. It was as if their very biology was responding to him, recognizing him as something unique in the galaxy. This was just the beginning of a story that would be told across the stars for generations to come, the tale of how a simple human maintenance engineer became the key to unlocking one of the galaxy's most isolated and misunderstood species. 2 weeks after his unexpected promotion, Tom found himself aboard the Moonflower vessel, Garden of Light. The ship's interior was unlike anything he had ever seen in his years of space travel. Living plants grew along the corridors, their leaves shimmering with the same bioluminescence as their owners. The air was thick with sweet-smelling spores that the Moonflowers assured him were harmless to humans. Ambassador Rose had taken a particular interest in teaching Tom about their culture. "Our ships are living things," she explained as they walked through a tunnel made of twisting vines. "They grow and adapt just as we do. The fear response that others experience? It's not meant to harm. It's meant to protect." Tom learned that the Moonflowers hadn't always been feared. Once, long ago, they had been hunted for their natural bioluminescence, their bodies harvested for the precious light-producing compounds within them. The fear response had evolved as a defense mechanism, but it had also trapped them in isolation. During one of their daily meetings, a young moonflower named Dawn approached Tom. Unlike the others, who maintained a respectful distance, she moved close enough for him to see the intricate patterns flowing beneath her translucent skin. "Would you?" She hesitated, her patterns flickering with nervousness. "Would you be willing to participate in our bonding ceremony?" The room fell silent. Ambassador Rose's patterns flashed with surprise. "Dawn, that is not something to ask lightly. The bonding ceremony is sacred." Tom scratched his head, feeling the weight of all eyes on him. "What exactly is this ceremony?" Rose explained that the bonding ceremony was their most important ritual. It involved two beings sharing their deepest fears with each other, accepting them, and moving beyond them together. No outsider had ever successfully completed it, all had fled before the ceremony could finish. "The fear you feel now is nothing compared to what you would experience in the ceremony," Rose warned. "Many of our own kind fail to complete it." But Tom had spent his life facing fear. Every time he repaired a critical system, every emergency repair during deep space flight, they had all taught him that fear was just another tool, a warning system to keep you alert and careful. "I'll do it," he said simply. The preparation for the ceremony took 3 days. The moonflowers created a special chamber filled with their most powerful fear-inducing spores. Dawn would be his partner in the ceremony, as she had been the one to ask. Tom noticed her patterns would brighten whenever he entered a room, like a smile made of light. The human delegation strongly advised against his participation. "You're risking your sanity," the ship's doctor warned. "We don't fully understand their biology or how it affects human minds." But Tom had made his decision. He understood now why he had been chosen for this role. It wasn't just his ability to resist their fear effect, it was his acceptance of fear as a natural part of life. The night before the ceremony, Dawn visited him in his quarters. Her patterns were dimmed, showing concern. "You can still change your mind," she said softly. "No one would think less of you." Tom smiled, continuing to check his maintenance tools out of habit. "You know what's funny? In all my years fixing ships, I've learned that the more you understand something that scares you, the less power it has over you. Maybe that's what your people have been waiting for, someone who wants to understand the fear instead of running from it." Dawn's patterns brightened at his words, creating a beautiful display that lit up the entire room. As she left, Tom realized that tomorrow would either mark a historic moment in human-moonflower relations, or, well, he preferred not to think about the alternative. Either way, he knew this was exactly where he needed to be. The chamber for the bonding ceremony looked like a garden from a dream. Bioluminescent flowers covered the walls, their soft light pulsing in rhythm with the ship's living systems. Tom stood at one entrance while Dawn waited at the other. Between them lay a path through swirling mists that sparkled with tiny points of light. Ambassador Rose spoke the traditional words to begin the ceremony: "Fear is the gate through which truth passes. Only those who accept their fears can truly bond with another soul." As Tom took his first step into the mist, the effects began immediately. The chamber seemed to stretch endlessly, and the mist formed into shapes from his deepest fears. He saw the vacuum of space reaching for him through imaginary hull breaches. He witnessed the Star Seeker's reactor core melting down while his tools turned to dust in his hands. Every catastrophic failure he'd ever prevented played out before him, but this time, he couldn't stop them. Dawn moved through her own fears on the other side. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered wildly as she faced visions of her people's violent past, of being hunted and harvested. Her light dimmed several times, almost going out completely, but she pressed forward. The ceremony required them to reach the center of the chamber and join hands. Simple in theory, nearly impossible in practice. The closer they got to each other, the more intense their fears became. Tom's vision filled with new terrors. He saw Dawn's people rejecting him, their light turning cold and hostile. He felt the crushing loneliness of being the only human who could interact with them, forever caught between two worlds. His legs shook with each step, but he remembered his own words about understanding fear. Fear is just another system, he muttered to himself, falling back on his engineer's mindset. Like a warning light on a console. You acknowledge it, but you don't let it stop you from doing your job. Dawn was now close enough that he could see her clearly through the mist. Her patterns had taken on a new configuration that no human had ever seen before, the sacred pattern of bonding. The sight gave him strength to push through the final wave of fear. Their hands met in the center of the chamber. The moment they touched, something extraordinary happened. Instead of seeing fears, they began sharing memories. Tom felt Dawn's joy at growing up among the living ships, her wonder at first seeing the stars. Dawn experienced Tom's satisfaction in fixing broken things, his pride in keeping his crewmates safe. The mist around them transformed, becoming a swirling display of light that matched Dawn's patterns. The other moonflowers watching the ceremony gasped in amazement. Never had they seen such a perfect synchronization between their kind and another species. Ambassador Rose's voice shook with emotion as she declared, "The bond is true. The ceremony is complete." As the mist cleared, Tom and Dawn remained holding hands, their minds still linked through the lingering effects of the ceremony. Dawn's patterns had permanently changed, now carrying a small piece of pattern that matched Tom's brainwaves. According to Moonflower tradition, this meant they would always be able to find each other, no matter the distance. The human delegation, watching from behind protective screens, erupted in cheers. This was more than just a personal victory for Tom, it was proof that humans and moonflowers could form deep, meaningful connections. Later that evening, as the moonflowers celebrated with a festival of lights, Dawn explained to Tom what made him special. "You didn't just resist our fear effect," she said, her patterns dancing with joy. "You understood it. You saw it as part of us, not something to be overcome or defeated. That's why the bond worked." Tom smiled, watching the celebration around them. The living ship seemed to pulse with happiness, its corridors brighter than ever before. He realized that his accidental fall into that diplomatic meeting hadn't just changed his life, it had opened a door that would change both species forever. But as he looked at Dawn's shimmering patterns, he also knew that this was just the beginning. The bond they shared would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine, and their greatest challenges still lay ahead. News of the successful bonding spread through the galaxy like a shockwave. Within days, the Garden of Light was surrounded by ships from dozens of species, all demanding to witness the unprecedented partnership between a human and a moonflower. Some came out of curiosity, others out of skepticism, and a few with darker intentions. Tom noticed the changes immediately. The bond with Dawn had altered him in subtle ways. He could sense her emotions even when they were in different parts of the ship, and sometimes he caught glimpses of bioluminescent patterns dancing at the edges of his vision. The ship's doctor found that his brain waves now matched the unique frequency of moonflower communication. "Your cellular structure is adapting," the doctor explained, staring at the test results in disbelief. "It's as if the bond is physically changing you to better communicate with them." Dawn experienced changes too. Her natural fear aura had weakened around Tom, replaced by a warm, welcoming glow that other humans could safely approach. This discovery sparked intense interest from both human and moonflower scientists. Could their bond be the key to helping their species interact normally? But not everyone celebrated their union. A group of moonflower elders arrived from their homeworld, their patterns displaying deep concern. They believed that diluting their species' natural defenses could leave them vulnerable to the kind of exploitation they had fled from centuries ago. "Our fear response protected us," one elder named Dusk argued during a heated council meeting. "Without it, we risk returning to the dark times when we were hunted like animals." Tom stood his ground, Dawn by his side. Your fear response helped you survive, he said, drawing on his engineer's practical nature. But survival isn't the same as living. You've been trapped by your own defense mechanism, unable to form real connections with other species. The argument might have continued, but at that moment, alarms blared throughout the ship. A group of smugglers, hoping to profit from the legendary Moonflower light essence, had launched an attack. They believed the human-Moonflower bond had weakened the ship's natural defenses. They were wrong. Tom and Dawn moved as one, their shared bond creating something entirely new. While Dawn's fear aura intensified to protect the ship's vital areas, Tom used his engineering knowledge to strengthen the living vessel's defenses. Their synchronized efforts created a display of power that left the attackers in awe and retreat. The incident proved what Tom had been trying to explain. The bond hadn't weakened the Moonflowers, it had given them new strength through understanding and cooperation. The elders, witnessing this display, began to reconsider their position. Ambassador Rose saw an opportunity. Perhaps, she suggested, we could establish a program. Carefully selected humans, those who show potential for understanding rather than fighting fear, could help us bridge the gap with other species. The idea took root. Soon, plans were made to create a special training facility where humans could learn to understand and work with the Moonflower's unique biology. Tom would be instrumental in designing the program, using his own experience to help others navigate the challenges he'd faced. Dawn's patterns swirled with excitement as they discussed the future. We're writing a new chapter in both our species' histories, she said, her light synchronizing with Tom's now visible aura. Fear brought us together, but understanding will keep us together. Tom smiled, watching the patterns of light dance between them. His life had changed dramatically from his days of fixing air recyclers, but he still approached each new challenge with the same practical mindset. Sometimes the best way to fix something isn't to eliminate the problem, he said, but to understand why it exists in the first place. As they stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars streak by, both knew that their journey was far from over. The bond between them had opened new possibilities, but it had also painted a target on their backs. Somewhere out in the vast galaxy, others were watching, plotting, and waiting. Their greatest test was still to come. 6 months after the historic bonding, the training facility on the Moonflower colony world, Haven, was ready to receive its first group of human candidates. The planet's surface bloomed with the same bioluminescent flora that filled their ships, creating vast gardens that glowed beneath the light of 3 moons. Tom and Dawn had become instructors, teaching humans and Moonflowers alike how to bridge the gap between their species. But their success had drawn unwanted attention. Strange ships had been spotted at the edge of the system, quickly disappearing when investigated. One morning, while Tom was checking the facility's life support systems, he noticed something odd. These readings don't make sense, he muttered, his engineer's instincts tingling. The air composition showed trace elements that shouldn't be there, too subtle for most to notice but clear as day to his experienced eyes. Dawn felt his concern through their bond before he could even call her. She arrived at his location, her patterns showing worry. What's wrong? Someone's been tampering with the atmospheric processors, Tom explained, pointing to the readings. They're trying to weaken the Moonflower's natural defenses by introducing a dampening agent into the air. Their discovery led to a facility-wide investigation. Among the new human candidates, they found a spy working for a group called the Harvesters, descendants of the original hunters who had forced the Moonflowers into isolation centuries ago. The spy was caught, but the damage was done. Several Moonflowers had been exposed to the dampening agent, their fear response weakened. They felt vulnerable for the first time in generations. Panic began to spread through the colony. Tom watched as Dawn tried to calm her people, her patterns creating soothing waves of light. Their bond had grown stronger over the months, and he could feel her determination to protect her people. But he also sensed something else, an idea forming in her mind. The dampening agent, she said suddenly, turning to him. It doesn't just weaken our defenses. It makes us more receptive to bonding. Tom understood immediately. What the harvesters had intended as a weapon could be transformed into a tool. With careful refinement, they could use it to help willing moonflowers and humans form bonds more easily, while still maintaining their natural defenses against threats. The human scientists and moonflower healers worked together to modify the agent. Tom's practical knowledge of ship systems proved invaluable in adjusting the atmospheric processors to distribute the refined version safely. Dawn's understanding of her people's biology helped ensure the changes wouldn't harm them. But not everyone supported their work. A faction of hardline moonflower elders, led by the stern Elder Dusk, saw any modification of their natural abilities as a threat to their species' survival. They demanded the facility be shut down. "You're changing what we are," Elder Dusk accused during a colony meeting, his patterns sharp with anger. "Our fear response is what makes us moonflowers." Dawn stood before the assembly, her patterns bright with conviction. "What makes us moonflowers is not our fear, but our ability to bond deeply with others. Fear was never meant to isolate us, it was meant to protect us until we found those who could understand us." The debate raged on, but a new threat was approaching. The harvesters, learning of the modified dampening agent, had gathered a fleet. They planned to steal the research and use it to finally break the moonflower's defenses completely. Tom and Dawn knew they had little time. They needed to prove that their way, understanding and cooperation rather than exploitation, was the path forward for both species. But with enemies both inside and outside the colony, they would need every bit of their bond strength for what was coming. As they prepared for the inevitable confrontation, Tom remembered something Dawn had told him during their bonding ceremony: "Fear shows us what we care about most." Looking at the colony they'd helped build, the bridges they'd started to form between their peoples, he understood those words more than ever. The harvester fleet appeared in Haven's sky like a swarm of dark stars, their ships designed to absorb light rather than reflect it, the perfect predators for a world of living light. Colony sensors counted 30 vessels, all armed with specialized equipment for capturing and containing moonflowers. Tom stood in the colony's control center, his mind linked with Dawn's through their bond. Around them, other bonded pairs of humans and moonflowers had taken up defensive positions. Though few in number, their combined abilities made them formidable guardians. "They're using our old weakness against us," Dawn observed, her patterns shifting with tactical calculations. "Their ships are designed to hunt our light." Tom studied the enemy fleet's formation with an engineer's eye. "Then let's give them more light than they can handle." Their plan was bold. Using the modified dampening agent as a catalyst, they would attempt something never before tried: a colony-wide synchronization of all moonflower light patterns, amplified by their human partners' unique brainwave frequencies. Elder Dusk, who had opposed their work, now stood with them. "Perhaps," he admitted, his patterns showing humility, "it is time to use our fear not to hide, but to fight." The harvesters struck first, launching pods designed to penetrate the colony's living walls. But they weren't prepared for what they found inside. Each bonded pair had taken control of a section of the colony's defenses. Where the harvesters expected to find frightened, weakened moonflowers, they instead encountered perfectly synchronized teams. Through their bond, Tom could feel Dawn coordinating the colony's response. His technical knowledge merged with her natural abilities, allowing them to transform the colony's atmospheric processors into a weapon. They flooded sections of the colony with concentrated light particles, overwhelming the harvesters' light-absorbing technology. The battle raged through the glowing corridors of Haven. Harvester troops, wearing dark suits designed to protect them from the moonflower's fear response, found their equipment malfunctioning under the combined assault of light and focused fear projections. In the midst of the chaos, Tom noticed something critical. "Their ship's absorbing technology," he said through the bond. "It has a limit. If we exceed it..." Dawn understood immediately. Through their shared connection, she broadcast the plan to all the bonded pairs. Each moonflower began to intensify their light, while their human partners helped focus and direct the energy. The colony itself, responding to their combined will, began to pulse with increasing brightness. The harvester ships, designed to absorb and contain light, couldn't handle the overwhelming surge of energy. Their systems began to overload. One by one, their dark hulls cracked, leaking captured light back into space. But the effort was taking its toll. Tom could feel Dawn weakening beside him, her patterns flickering with exhaustion. Around them, other moonflowers were reaching their limits. They needed something more. That's when Elder Dusk made his move. The old moonflower stepped forward, his patterns shifting into an ancient configuration. "There is one more light we can share," he announced. "The legacy light, passed down from our ancestors." The elder's body began to glow with an intensity that dwarfed all other lights in the colony. It was the pure, unaltered light of the original moonflowers, before fear had changed them. This light carried no fear, only pure energy and life. The effect was immediate and devastating. The remaining harvester ships, unable to absorb or contain this ancient power, began to retreat. Their light-absorbing technology, designed for the moonflower's fear-tinged light, had no defense against this pure radiance. As the last enemy ship fled the system, cheers erupted throughout the colony. Humans and moonflowers celebrated together, their combined strength having achieved what neither species could have done alone. But Tom held Dawn close, feeling through their bond that this victory, while significant, wasn't the end. Elder Dusk's display of the legacy light had revealed something profound about the moonflower's true nature, and about the greater destiny that awaited both their species. In the days following the battle, Haven Colony hummed with unprecedented activity. The legacy light revealed by Elder Dusk had done more than just defeat the harvesters, it had awakened something deep within the moonflower's biological memory. Ancient patterns, dormant for centuries, began to surface in their light displays. Tom found Dawn in the colony's highest observation dome, her patterns shifting through these newly discovered configurations. Through their bond, he felt her wrestling with the implications of what they'd learned. "Our ancestors weren't warriors," she explained, her light dimming thoughtfully. "They were healers." The fear response wasn't originally a defense mechanism, it was a way to help others face and overcome their deepest fears. Elder Dusk had been translating ancient records stored within the colony's living walls. The truth they revealed was extraordinary. The moonflowers had once been known as the light healers of the galaxy, using their abilities to help other species confront and move past their psychological wounds. "The hunts changed us," Elder Dusk explained to the colony assembly. "Our fear response, originally meant to guide others through their fears, became twisted into a weapon of self-defense. We forgot our true purpose." Tom thought about all the times he'd fixed broken systems, how understanding the original design was crucial to proper repair. "Your people didn't just lose their purpose," he said. "They lost the understanding of why they had these abilities in the first place." The human moonflower bonds had inadvertently begun restoring that ancient purpose. Each bonded pair demonstrated what the moonflowers were truly capable of, not just projecting fear, but helping others work through it. The training facility, originally designed to help humans resist fear, could now be repurposed to train new light healers. Dawn's patterns brightened with sudden inspiration. "That's why you were able to bond with me, Tom. Your approach to fear, understanding it, working with it rather than fighting it, it's exactly what our ancestors tried to teach." The news spread quickly through the galaxy. Species that had once feared the moonflowers began to see them differently. The first visitors were the brave ones, those seeking help with deep-seated traumas or phobias. Under the guidance of bonded pairs, they found not terror but healing. Tom watched with pride as Dawn worked with their first official patients. Her ability to project fear, combined with his practical approach to problem-solving, helped people understand and move past their anxieties. Other bonded pairs developed their own unique methods, each contributing to the restoration of the Moonflower's ancient art. The colony itself began to change. The defensive structures built out of fear were gradually replaced with healing gardens. The living walls, no longer needed as barriers, became channels for the therapeutic light that was the Moonflower's true heritage. One evening, as Haven's 3 moons rose over the transformed colony, Tom found himself back in the maintenance section where his journey had begun. The tools he'd once used to fix physical systems now served a different purpose, helping to repair the broken connections between species. Dawn joined him, her patterns synchronizing with his thoughts. "Do you ever miss your old job?" she asked, though their bond told her the answer. "Sometimes," Tom admitted, smiling. "But I'm still fixing things, in a way. Just on a much bigger scale." Their bond had grown stronger than ever, a living example of what was possible when fear was faced with understanding rather than resistance. Throughout the galaxy, other humans had begun showing the same potential, leading to more bonds and more healing. The harvesters never returned. Perhaps they too had been changed by their exposure to the legacy light, or perhaps they simply realized that their old methods no longer held power over a people who had rediscovered their true strength. As Tom and Dawn stood watching new students arrive at the training facility, humans and Moonflowers ready to learn the art of healing together, they knew that their accidental meeting had set something miraculous in motion. The fear that had once divided species had become a bridge between them. "Fear shows us what we care about most," Dawn repeated her old saying, her patterns dancing with joy. "And what we care about most is helping others find their light." Tom squeezed her hand, their shared light illuminating the path forward. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't facing fear alone, but helping others face it together. In the end, that was the greatest repair he'd ever made.